So good morning, everyone. It's fantastic that you can join us today. It's really pleasing to see a lot of familiar names of people that have joined us from our channel community. And I'd like to extend a really warm welcome to a number of partners of ABBYY. It's really great to have you with us. This webinar is a series of webinars essentially that we do with partners of ours. And what the aim of this is to do is just to try and talk a little bit more around a solution, more of a value-added sale, so that you can take more opportunities, more conversations to your customer base, whether that's your existing customer bases or new customer bases that you're looking to speak to. So we have a number of webinars with ISV partners of ours that we've done in the past that might be looking at everything from document management to enterprise content management routines. So I certainly encourage you to take a look at the back catalogue, and we'll share with you some information at the end of this webinar. So we're really excited about this joint development with ABBYY that's really going to help end-to-end digital transformation. There's been a huge amount of work that's gone in to bring ABBYY's Flexi Capture for NX Manager to market, and we really hope to start working with you so that you can take this opportunity to your customer bases. The session is going to be recorded, so this will be made available via an automated email that will go out through the GoToWebinar platform tomorrow, so you can view that again or share with a colleague. And then also this webinar and other collateral will also be hosted on our imaging channel program portal. And again, there's a couple of slides at the end of this where I'll share with you what the benefits of joining our program will bring and how you can access that. If you've got questions, you should be able to see a little drop down menu, so please just ask away, and what we'll do at the end of the session is we'll get round to those and put those to Steve. But I guess without further delay, I'm going to hand you over to Steve Ponting. He's the Director of Customer Enablement at ABBYY, and we're delighted to have him with us. So let me just make you presenter, Steve.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the warm introduction as well. Really appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to take an hour of your precious time. That's not just aimed at Andy, but that's aimed at all of our wonderful partners that are joining this session today. Thank you very, very much for taking the time out. I really hope to make this session as useful for you and as informative for you and as unboring as possible for you. To Andy's point, the purpose of today really is to help understand how, through a combination of NX Manager, our connector, and Flexi Capture, you can offer truly end-to-end digital transformation. And to keep it simple and relatable for everybody, I've chosen to talk about accounts payable automation, just purely because that's something that everybody understands and it's a problem that everybody has. That doesn't mean that it's limited only to that scenario. So please do bear that in mind as we go through, that a lot of the concepts, a lot of the opportunity that I'm talking about applies to other processes, not just accounts payable. So without further ado, let's kick off. The first thing I want to point out is that, the partnership between ABBYY and Fujitsu is not a new one. Although the connector that allows you to link NX Manager with Flexi Capture is new, and that's the primary reason why we're having this webinar today, our relationship is certainly not new. And we've been working together for more than 10 years. Personally, I've been involved with Fujitsu, with conferences, etc., for at least the last 5 years, probably more than that actually. And it's really great to see, that relationship growing stronger and stronger. And I think this addition to our portfolio is really only going to help that, and to help you as partners, whether that's ABBYY partners or Fujitsu partners, help you go to market and to make your messaging that much stronger. So as I mentioned, the purpose today really is to talk about how, through those three pieces of technology, the NX Manager alongside the FI 700, the connector that links that Flexi Capture, as a single message that enables that true end-to-end digital transformation. So as I said, I'm going to start by focusing on the accounts payable process, purely because it is so relatable. It's something that everybody understands and comes across. And to address that market, we offer something called Flexi Capture for Invoices. So Flexi Capture for Invoices is an umbrella term that links several pieces of our technology together. Flexi Capture is an enterprise intelligent document processing platform, and it helps organizations raise their content intelligence. So what we mean by that is it allows organizations to process documents and to access the data that's contained within those documents and convert that data into information and knowledge via other systems and processes. Now, we offer that technology, Flexi Capture for Invoices, through 4 routes. One is as an on-premise installation, and that is still quite a popular route to go. We also offer it as a SaaS model, which we call Flexi Capture for Invoice Cloud, which is hosted on Microsoft Azure, as you can see for yourself on the slide there. We also offer that as a software development kit, and a lot of our ISV partners will take that capability and embed it within their own products, within their own applications. So there's a lot of ABBYY powered applications out there on the market, even though you may not necessarily know it. And then finally, that SDK route is made available on the web. Again, it's hosted in Microsoft Azure, and it's accessible via a RESTful API. And that makes integrating the capabilities of Flexi Capture for Invoices or Flexi Capture as a base platform, really universal. However you want to consume that technology, there is the path that's right for you and for your customers. And the reason I mention that is because we find that working across many different verticals and working with many different industries, each of our customers has a slightly different appetite for risk. Some are quite happy to take cloud-based solutions. Others prefer to have things, on-premise or private cloud where they can totally control it. And that's fine. And that's why we do offer these various different solutions. And what's important to note there is that mirrors what's possible with NX Manager. That can be installed locally as a server application, but it can also be installed and used via the cloud if you want that distributed approach. So again, there's a real synergy between these two applications, and that's what makes the connector so powerful. So within the accounts payable automation space, there's really 3 key usage scenarios that Flexi Capture for Invoices makes possible. There's the traditional one, invoice processing, being able to understand that the system is looking at an invoice, knowing what an invoice looks like, and then extracting that invoice data for downstream processing, normally within inside an accounts package or an ERP system. Expense management, that's something that we've recently added to our portfolio, the ability to automatically identify and extract data from receipts, and account receivable processing or purchase order processing, which kind of mirrors what we do with the invoices. But what it means is that as a application, Flexi Capture now addresses inside that finance space, more than just one single route. So let's look at Flexi Capture for Invoices in a little bit more detail and actually see how it does what it does. And I'm sure you've all come across the term AI-powered applications or machine learning or deep learning. You can't avoid those terms within our industry. And it's something that ABBYY has really embraced, not just recently, but actually we've had AI, artificial intelligence, at the heart of our applications almost from the get-go when we first started with our OCR technology. And what it means for invoices, as you're looking at what can be quite a daunting slide, but it's actually really straightforward, is that out of the box, you've got that capability to extract key invoice data, including line item data, with very minimal configuration or setup. And what that does is it breaks down barriers to adoption. You don't have to go through the process of creating templates or forms, depending on the language that you're used to, for each supplier or each vendor. That has been totally removed and replaced by a pre-trained neural network that knows what an invoice looks like and knows what invoice features looks like, which is then improved through training as the application is used. So what this means is that we think about 90% of header fields should be extractable straight out of the box, and about 80% of line item data should be extractable straight out of the box. And where you've got that gap, 10% for the header fields and 20% for the line item fields, you can quite easily close that gap through user-led training. And what that user-led training is basically just having someone in what we call the verification screen, but it's essentially a sense check. You've got an image of the invoice that's being processed. You've got the fields that have been extracted from the invoice. And where you've got an issue, maybe we've not detected a date or an amount of money or a unit of measure, the operator just points on that field with a mouse, clicks, and then as that invoice is then, or that invoice data is then exported, the information that's being captured is fed back into the training. So the system is getting smarter as you're using it, which means that your exception rate is going down, your straight through processing rate is going up, and essentially the level of effort involved with this process, whether it's processing invoices, receipts, purchase orders, is coming down. And that's where you get the return on investment for using technology like this. Because it's pre-trained, it only knows what it's been told. So we can support a very wide number of countries and fields straight out of the box based on that training. So you can see that we already address most of the major markets here in Europe. You can see the UK, Germany, France, Austria, Belgium, but also much further afield, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and including the US as well. So it is a very, very comprehensive application that you get with FlexiCapture for invoices. And it does, as I said, it does mean that that initial setup is actually very, very straightforward. And to that point, what I'll do is just actually show you what that setup looks like. Now, I don't normally do live demos. I'm not a huge fan of live demos because they can go horribly wrong. But I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to try and show you exactly what that looks like when you create a FlexiCapture for invoice project. So I've just swapped screens, which is why your screen went black for a moment there, but it should now have caught up. So what I've done is I've moved across to my virtual machine. And on my virtual machine, I have an instance of FlexiCapture installed. I'm going to go to the project setup station, which is our central administration tool. Just wait for that to open up quickly. I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to drop that project into my temporary folder just so that I can get rid of it later. I'll imaginatively call it test. And what you'll see here, there's a drop down for project types. And when I click in that drop down, you can see that we've got pre-configured projects for invoice processing. So let me choose invoice processing EU or Europe and hit create. And what that will do now is it will create a FlexiCapture project with what we call a document definition for invoices. So it's the document definition that knows what an invoice looks like and knows which pieces of information to extract from an invoice. That process takes a couple of minutes. There are, that's done. So now we have our very first invoice processing project. Create a batch. Now normally, obviously talking about scanning, a batch would be a number of documents that are being scanned into the system. And you don't need to worry about doing any pre-sorting. It's one of the great things of the Fujitsu scanners. They're able to work with a mixed bundle of documents. You haven't got to go through and sort your receipts, sort out your hotel invoices, your other cost of sale invoices. You can just throw it all in together and regardless of the paper size or the style, they're going to go through the scanner and create that batch. I don't have a scanner here in my home office, but what I do have is some example images on my desktop, which is what I'm going to use. So let me just browse to some sample invoices. And I'll just pick one that I know is in English, just because that makes it easier for everybody. And we'll open that. So I've done nothing other than create this project. I've done no setup, no configuration whatsoever. This is as vanilla as you can possibly get. And depending on how cursed I am today, this should, in just a moment, come up as European invoice. And we will then have the extracted data that we can actually look at. And I'll show you what that verification looks like that I was talking about. So you can see we've got European invoice. Don't worry about the fact it says rejected status right now. There's a reason for that, and I'll talk you through that in a moment. And there's also a reason why this red error flag is there, and I'll mention that in just a moment as well. But what's important to note is it's already determined that it was an invoice that I fed into the system. It's already gone ahead and extract data. So let's open that up and just take a look. So this is the verification view I was talking about. This is what the users would see when they're working with this in a day-to-day situation. Some of the buttons across the top here would be different. It looks slightly different. That's because we're in the administration tool right now, not the user tool. But for the most part, it looks exactly the same. And what you can see is the image of the invoice that we processed here and the pieces of information that we've been able to extract. And again, I'd stress the point, there was no setup. I didn't do anything. You can see it's already been able to work out who the invoice was addressed to, who the vendor or the supplier was. We've got the addresses, which we could pass down into street, postcode, city, zip if we wanted to. We've got the invoice number, the invoice date, and the total amount. That's all done without me having to do anything. If we want to add additional pieces of information, we can edit that document definition, and you can see that there's a number of fields that have been grayed out because they've not been switched on, they've not been selected yet. And all we have to do is go in here and say, we want to add some additional fields, we want to extract perhaps the line items. We can turn that on, save that. Again, it'll just take a moment to do that. The reason it takes a moment is because there's a number of pre-configured rules here that are going through and checking whether the invoice is valid, whether or not certain business rules are met or not. Things like, does the net tax and gross amount total? Do we have bank details? Do we know who the business unit is? Do we know who the vendor is? Those types of things. That's why there's a slight delay there. Let me just publish that, which makes it available to the system. And now if I load another invoice, let's go with that one, why not? Again, it'll just take a moment to process. And then what you'll see is that on this invoice, rather than just extracting the header fields, as we did with the first one, this one will have the line item data extracted as well. So you can see here's the line item data. And if I scroll down, there I say, I told you there'd be cursor live demo, didn't I? I'm just going to have to re-recognize that one. Don't know why I did that. Worked perfectly yesterday. Very strange. There we go. Now we've got the line item data. So that kind of gives you an idea of how easy it is to set these things up. And as I mentioned, there's a number of rules that are included within the application. And you can see all of those rules have been triggered because I haven't given it any configuration. I've not done any setup. I've not given it any constraints. But you can see one of the obvious ones here is the invoice date. This invoice date's from 5 years ago. So obviously we wouldn't really want to process that. And the system knows that, and it's throwing that up as a warning. Things like we haven't got the business unit, we haven't matched that to the account system or the ERP system of record. So that's a problem. And of course, there's no purchase order that we're not matching against for the line items and things like that. So there's a lot of capability with FlexiCapture for invoices that comes straight out of the box. And if it can do that in what was just a couple of minutes, imagine what you can do if you spend a little bit of time actually setting it up properly. So that gives you a flavor of what it looks like and how it works. And as I mentioned, we've got this auto-learning process that's happening in the background, which is going to improve those extraction results as we use the system. So the more it gets used, the smarter it gets, the lower the exception rate. And that process of auto-learning applies to not just invoices, purchase orders, receipts, but any of the documents that you decide to process through FlexiCapture. They all have that same auto-learning capability. It's just when you're using it with invoices, we've got some enhanced capability where we use something called clustering. And what clustering will do is it will group like-for-like styles of invoices together for the training. So if you train for one vendor, vendors that look very similar, that have a similar problem, will be addressed as well. But the point there is that it's only by exception. You don't have to train every single vendor that you want to process. That's where that 90% out of the box for header information and 80% out of the box for line item information comes into play. So there we are. That's essentially the kind of the nuts and bolts of it. What it means is that you're able to go to market with an application that connects to a scanner, which is very capable of processing these types of documents. So if you want to work with expense management, you've got a scanner in the FI 7300 that's capable of working with those types of documents, with, you know, tube receipts, with taxi receipts, with restaurant receipts, with hotel invoices, you know, various different document styles, shapes, sizes, all bundled together into a single batch and scanned through. And what that means is that you're reducing the amount of friction for your users, both in terms of the initial point of capture, but also the downstream processing, because you've got that intelligence that's built into Flexi Capture. And when you're working with things like purchase orders, now the same principles apply as with the invoices. So you've got that pre-trained logic that knows what a purchase order looks like. It knows to be able to extract purchase order type data. You're able to link it to your accounts package or your ERP system to be able to look up things like article numbers, descriptions, unit costs, and things like that to check the validity of the purchase order. And of course, you've also got that training on the user side as well that's enabling the system to get smarter as you go through. So just some headlines for the purchase orders. You can see the main fields that we extract: order number, order date, total currency, delivery date. I won't read everything, you're perfectly capable of reading. And then for the receipts, again, very, very similar idea. We've got the out-of-the-box capability, knows what a receipt looks like, it knows how to extract receipt data. What's a real value add here, though, is that it will also try to determine the expense type. So, you know, whether it's a restaurant receipt, whether it's general retail receipt like this Walmart that you're seeing on the screen now, whether it's a taxi receipt for travel, a train ticket, etc., that's automatically determined. And again, that's powered by pre-training that we have done. And what this means is that in an expense management scenario, the amount of effort to get that up and running is reduced. The time to value is reduced. And it means that for yourselves as implementation partners, you know, you can focus on building the solution, mapping the workflows, making sure that the data is being utilized the right way, not having to spend time actually getting the core foundations up and running. And I think that is a really, really key message, you know, having that ability to work with all of the key fields across all of the major expense types in the major markets straight out of the box is a real win for yourselves. just to give you a very, very quick flavor of what that looks like, we've got a couple of different styles of expense receipts. You can see we've got a couple of hotel invoices, a couple of normal receipts. And what FlexiCapture is going to do, and this is a video, I'm not going to risk running a live demo again, but what you'll see in this video is that the system will process those, first of all determining what the image or the document is that it's looking at. So you can see there, invoice, receipt, etc. Extracting that information and only presenting the documents to a user where there's a query. And that's what that verification or export flag was doing. Where it says export, that's your straight through processing. It doesn't need to be put in front of someone. Where it needs verification, it might be because it wasn't able to determine confidently that it was definitely a receipt and not an invoice, or it might be that there's a problem with the quality of the document itself that's being scanned. And of course, that comes back to the quality of the device you're using to capture the image of that. You know, this has been captured on a mobile device using a camera. If you're using a high quality scanner, and hopefully you will be, because that's kind of why we're here talking, you're going to reduce that level of intervention and increase that level of straight through processing. And you can see that what we've done is then compiled those invoices and the receipts into the expense reports, and the user is then able to just correct anything which is not being populated, and that again is going to feed back into that training. So that action where the user completed Chick-fil-A, that is going to be remembered by the system and used going forward, and that's how powerful that user training is. So that gives you a really good picture of what FlexiCapture is, how it works, and what it can do. Now what I want to do is focus very much on the other topic of today, which is how we can integrate that capability of FlexiCapture with the capability of NX Manager to create that end-to-end digital transformation solution, because this really does allow you to go all the way from point of capture to posting of the invoice into the account system or the ERP system. This is true end-to-end processing here. So what we have with the connector is that link that allows the scanner via NX Manager to know what activities a particular person is able to do, and that is driven by their user logon. So you've got an NFC card, you walk up to the scanner, present your card, the scanner knows who you are, and it knows what you're allowed to do. So you load your documents, you press the button, and everything else is taken care of. And it really is that simple. And that's one of the key advantages of NX Manager. Having that centralized management, having that integration with Active Directory allows you to have that really simplified user experience. You've got everything centrally administered. If you've got a new starter coming into the business, you can set them up, set their rules and permissions inside of NX Manager. We can mirror that inside of FlexiCapture using Active Directory integration. So they walk up to the scanner, they load their bundle of invoices, the batch of invoices into the scanner, and they press scan. And it already knows where to send those invoices. And when they come to complete verification, if they need to, inside of FlexiCapture, it knows who they are and what they are permitted to do. So it really does give you that true end-to-end process. And as I said, we focused very much on the accounts payable process here, but that combination of technology, NX Manager, the connector, FlexiCapture, allows you to address an almost unlimited number of business processes and document types within those processes. So don't be focused solely on that accounts payable. I chose that as a topic because it's really easily identifiable and it's something that is relatable but to everyone. But this can just as easily be used in HR, in transport and logistics organizations, for shipping of goods. There's all manner of different use cases that can be addressed by this. And having that capability of the scanner to work with various different document types bundled together, not having to go through and separate those out, really does increase the level of value here as well, because what it generates is a really frictionless experience for the user. It means that they're not having to go through and choose lots and lots of different settings or options, or they don't have to understand what's happening in the background. They just walk up to the machine, load the documents, press the button and walk away. It really is that straightforward. And in order for that to happen, all the heavy lifting is done inside of NX Manager and Flexi Capture. And again, I've just got a short video here that I'm going to show you that explains how, oops, try that again and actually press play this time, which actually explains how that happens. So you've got an understanding of what's involved. I showed you the configuration of Flexi Capture to get an invoice project up and running. This is what it looks like on the NX Manager side. So the connector runs an executable. You enter pretty basic information to allow the system to connect. You can see it's connected to Flexi Capture. We then add some information to allow it to connect to NX Manager. So that's the two sides, the two different systems that are going to be communicating. And then it will run task discovery. So what it will do is it will look at what projects are available on the Flexi Capture system. And you can see it's found a Flexi Capture invoice project. And then we open the NX Manager. This application should look familiar to a lot of you. And you can see that what we're doing is we're setting up how to send those scanned images into the Flexi Capture for invoice project. So just some source and export settings basically. And as I mentioned, this is all linked back to your Active Directory or to your Identity Manager. So it's easy to create groups. It's easy to have different roles and permissions. And because it's all centrally administered, you haven't got to be running around loading drivers onto each individual user's PCs in the way that you may have done in the past. So it does make the adoption of this very, very easy, particularly on the user side. This visualization is just showing you what's happening. Documents have been scanned. There's our single button that we're going to press to send those documents to Flexi Capture. You can see the document was sent. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily review that every time. That's just showing you that it's happening. And this screen should look quite familiar. You just saw this inside of Flexi Capture a moment ago. We can see that those two invoices were processed and they're now ready for export. And in this case, we're exporting to a system called mFiles. And that's quite an important point to mention. At ABBYY, we have a really wide and varied landscape of solution partners that we work with and integration partners that we work with. So we do have out-of-the-box connectors for a lot of the very common applications. So you can leverage that to grow your footprint inside of organizations. If they've got systems like mFiles, if they're working with RPA tools like Blue Prism or Automation Anywhere, we can use that as an in because we have connectors to those systems. And I've got a slide that speaks to that in just a moment. But why is this important? Why are we having this conversation today? Well, it's because there's a huge market opportunity. Even talking about AP automation, which feels as though it's been around forever, actually, there's still a huge market for it. Whether that's organizations which have previously had an AP automation system, which they're now updating to take advantage of new capabilities like AI, or maybe it's organizations which are growing or needing to grow, and they have to put some kind of system in place rather than recruit lots of additional AP clerks. So there's a huge market for it, and you can see that according to the analysts, 90% of invoices globally are still processed manually. Imagine that. We've literally tip of the iceberg stuff. And if 62% of small medium business, small medium enterprise invoices are still paper based, then not only have we got a huge market for the automation piece, Flexi Capture for invoices, but we still have a huge market for the image acquisition piece, scanning piece. So this is a really, really important market for us, and it's not just within the SME market either. If we look at some of the case studies, so these are some examples where ABBYY and our partners have worked together to deliver AP automation. You'll see that there are some really big names that you would have expected to already have a highly efficient solution in place. So this was a project that I worked with very closely myself. We're able to process 400,000 invoices a year through Flexi Capture, and there was a 9-minute reduction in time per invoice. So just let that sink in for a minute. 9 minutes per invoice saved. Imagine the ROI on that. We actually were able to achieve an 80% straight-through processing rate by matching the invoice data to the purchase order data to the GRN data. And that's a really important point to mention. Straight-through processing can be achieved if you've got the right reference information available. If you've got access to the goods received, not invoiced, then it makes that matching process so much easier. Another example, this isn't one that I worked on myself, but it's still a really good case to talk about with Pepsico. 21,000 documents scanned in 2,000 batches and 40,000 pages in the first 3 months alone. So it just gives you an idea of how quickly projects can be implemented and scaled up, and actually start delivering value in a very, very short period of time. And then talking about the really big volumes or bigger volumes, Venus Assets and Services, logistics company based out of Germany, but they process 1.8 million documents per year through Flexi Capture and have achieved 95% recognition rate across those 1.8 million documents. So that gives you an idea of just how scalable this is. And actually, Flexi Capture itself is a highly scalable application. Very few organizations hit the limit of what Flexi Capture is capable of. Normally, we'd say 3.5 million images per day. We do have organizations out there processing 8 million pages per day. Imagine that, it's a lot of paper. So you've got that scalability, both in terms of what you can do with NX Manager, being able to operate a number of scanners across an organization or across different operations inside of an organization. You've got the scalability inside of Flexi Capture, and now you've got that connector that is linking that together and making that end-to-end transformation possible. And of course, a big part of that is not the image acquisition at the beginning. It's not the processing in the middle. It's what's happening at the back end, so where those documents are being stored. And as I mentioned, we've got partnerships with a number of organizations. Our ecosystem is large and growing day by day, and this just gives you an idea of some of the organizations whom we partner with and who we've had a great deal of success with. So that brings me to the end. It gives me the opportunity to say thank you very much for your attention over the last 40 minutes. Let's open this up and take some questions.
Brilliant stuff. What a great overview. Thanks, Steve. One of the questions that's come up has been around costs. I don't know whether that's something that we're better off following up directly, or whether you've got anything to say on the cost side of the ABBYY part of the solution.
I'll keep it vague because there's a number of factors that can influence the cost of the solution. But obviously, in order to be successful in a competitive landscape, your pricing has to be competitive. And we at ABBYY are incredibly competitive. And also, when it comes to our partners, incredibly flexible in our pricing models as well. The entry price point is probably a lot lower than you think it might be for an application with this level of capability. But yeah, I think it's probably best if we have a discussion one-on-one and we can talk about the actual needs of potential project or whatever, and then we can share some real numbers with you. But thanks for the question. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I can certainly share those details with you afterwards, Steve. The thing to note, there has been a question around products of ours that have the capability to work with NX Manager. It is limited to the FI 7300 NX. And if you already have customers with the 7300 NX, then they can access the Flexi Capture connector free of charge. We also have questions. We've got a very varied demography across our attendance in terms of countries. So we've got a lot of questions around OCR in certain languages. What's the recognition accuracy in Greek? I think that would be an interesting one if you know that off the top of your head, Steve. We've got people asking about Portuguese. We've got people asking about Arabic. Is there anything on that side?
Yeah, it's a really, actually, you know, I kind of preempted that question. It's something that comes up really regularly. And one of the great things about working at ABBYY is that you get to come across all of these different languages, which you may not otherwise come across. And as an application, we support over 200 languages for recognition. And the ones you mentioned there are covered as well. So we are able to read Greek, we are able to read Arabic. The level of recognition accuracy varies very much depending on the quality. And that's why having partnerships with organizations like Fujitsu is so important, because, you know, having that initial quality at the point of capture just makes everything else in the process so much easier. But to narrow it down a little bit, if we look at a complex language like Arabic, we would expect to achieve somewhere around 96% accuracy given a good quality input document. Greek, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but certainly with the Latin-based languages, the recognition rates should be in the very high 90s, you know, even as 99, getting close to 100% of accuracy. Again, depending upon the quality of the input document.
Of course, yeah. Well, what we'll do is we'll share the questions afterwards that we can go directly back to people. I've got one here. What is the advantage of the integration in NX against hot folder?
That's a fair question, actually. And again, it's one that I kind of preempted. One of the major advantages of having a connector is it limits the possibility of things going wrong. You haven't got to worry about the hot folder trying to collect the documents before scanning has been completed, which can be a challenge, particularly if you're scanning large batches and you've got a very short polling interval. The other advantage, and I think this is the major advantage for me, is that because it's controlled through access rights and permissions, both in terms of the NX Manager and FlexiCapture, it makes that user experience so much more straightforward where you've got multiple people involved in a process. If you've got a single user who's scanning documents and then working with FlexiCapture, a hot folder is probably not that big an issue. If you've got 30 people working with scanners and working with FlexiCapture, then making sure that each individual sees the documents that they should be seeing and no one else is can become more of a challenge with hot folders. You have to have, you know, mappings of import profiles to individuals. You have to make sure that their roles and permissions are correct on both sides. The management of it just becomes more complex. So having the connector dealing with that for you, having the integration with Active Directory or whatever you're using for identity management on both sides, and having all of those access permissions managed for you just makes the whole process, and particularly the user experience, much better.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Great answer. I think that was really comprehensive. So that should cover that part, and it's some very solid points there. Just looking at other questions, I think if I understand the question correctly, he's asking about the RPA, and is that apart from FlexiCapture or is it a separate solution?
So RPA is a separate solution. Robotic process automation is about automating activities and tasks within a process. So one of those activities might be to take the export from FlexiCapture. So let's say we export to something like a CSV file or an Excel spreadsheet. What RPA would do is take that spreadsheet, find the values within the spreadsheet, the invoice number, the invoice date, the total, and then enter that into an application like maybe Cedar Open Accounts or Pegasus or whatever you're using as an accounts package, instead of a user having to do that if there's no integration. And I think that's one of the key points with RPA. It's very, very good at closing the gap where you don't have the ability to use connectors or APIs.
Perfect, super stuff. We then have a question around recognition rates in ICR/block form style documents and whether you can offer any insight into that.
Yeah, of course. So ICR handprint recognition, still very much part of what we do, very much a capability inside of FlexiCapture. And it's used when you've got things like questionnaires, surveys, application forms, even things like census records will have that style of filling. The recognition quality is not as high as it is with printed text, as you'd expect, because there's a lot more variability in terms of the way that people form their characters and the amount of space given around them. But to give a more direct answer, you would certainly expect accuracy of 75% there or thereabouts. Again, really dependent upon the quality and also how much constraint you can put around it. And what I mean by that is, if you're able to say, I expect this value to be a date, or I expect this value to be a person's name or a postcode, by being able to determine that, you're able to push the recognition rates higher. If you're not able to do that, then typically you'd see slightly lower recognition rates because there's more possibility in terms of what the characters may be.
Of course, yeah, and of course, if we're considering the addition of PaperStream IP alongside what we're trying to do here, that automatically is cleaning up images as they're being scanned, and that's going to only impact on the recognition rates and improving those. So thanks, Steve. What else have we got here? Mark's asked a question, Mark Harvey, about how could we use Flexi Capture with other scanners and how would that work? That may be something that we need to come back about, unless you've got any insight there, Steve.
So FlexiCapture is able to work with other scanner manufacturers. It's not something that's unique to Fujitsu. We only have the connector with the NX Manager. So, when you're working with the FI 7300s, it's certainly a lot easier to work with FlexiCapture. But there are possibilities to connect to Twain, WIA or ISIS drivers inside of FlexiCapture to load the native scan driver and then use what we call the scanning station. But again, it's not as seamless or as joined up as it would be using this solution.
With the connector, gotcha. Okay, so in theory, all our FI scanners that have that Twain and ISIS capability and our new SP generation, there's the potential essentially
Absolutely.
to use FlexiCapture.
Yes, there
Great
is.
stuff. Okay. I don't think I've ever had so many questions. This is great. For which languages do you have already the pre-setups for invoices or other documents?
That's a really good question, and it's quite a comprehensive list, and I can't remember them all off the top of my head. If you get in touch with me after the session, I will share a link with you to our help pages, which documents all of that out, the supported countries, the supported languages, and that will give you the comprehensive list of what we can do out of the box.
Great stuff. There are others, but I think probably what's best is we'll follow up with people directly. I appreciate the huge engagement that we've got from the people that are attending the call, but I think let's wrap up, Steve. I think really the core message here is just envisaging how we can help our customers to really seamlessly and with really little setup, just extract all that data that they have in unstructured and semi-structured documents. The conversation that we can now have around the Flexi Capture connector with our customers will really help them accelerate that digital transformation journey. And in these challenging times, ever-changing times, that's more and more prominent. We can really help automate those workflows, optimize those processes, and ultimately improve the customer experience. And that's what it's all about. It's all about that business continuity and how can we help, as I say, accelerate the journey. So I hope you've all seen the extra value that this powerful digital intelligence tool can offer that your customers, and ultimately we're going to help them enable the world's flow of knowledge. As I say, if they've already got NX Manager, then they can access the Flexi Capture connector free of charge. But as Steve has said, there's multiple opportunities with our whole range of scanners. So please talk to your existing install base and talk to us around how can we push and uncover opportunities within new data sets. I'm going to quickly make myself presenter for a final couple of slides, just to let you know a bit more around collateral. So just check that you can see that. We've seen that screen. There's a wealth of collateral that's been worked on recently, not just, well, predominantly from ABBYY's marketing team. And you'll see here on the screen that we have a brochure that's been produced. We have a number of press coverage editorial that's been generated as a result of the press release that's been pushed out, and a copy of this recording. So what we're going to do is we're going to make that all available on our imaging channel program. I'd certainly encourage you, if you haven't already been a member, to sign up to our imaging channel program. You can access this information, and I'll also put links in the automated email that will go out tomorrow through the GoToWebinar platform. And we'll also be in contact directly. I liked some of Steve's takeout stats around the volume of paper and the volume still of manual processes. It's incredible how we've been talking about digital transformation, it seems, for years, but companies have still got very bad habits. I guess a lot of that's historical, but a lot of it is just we know we need to change, but we just need to have that prod. We need to understand how we can do it. We've recently commissioned a report into organizational intelligence and basically how companies are viewing information capture. What have they been doing? What do they think about doing? What are the benefits, and so on? So we've spoken to 1,200 companies, 1,200 organizations, built up a report that you see on the right hand side here, and we're also sending out comms to you, our channel partners, around how you can have better conversations with your customers around organizational intelligence, and linking that in with the tools that ABBYY provides is only going to really add that more value-add conversation. So again, I'll share this link so that you can access this information, download the report, watch the webinar. Within the channel program itself, we have a host of material that you can access. So all our webinars are hosted within there, and they may well be partner webinars. So there is one with M-Files, for example, but they'll also be looking at things like our latest product launches, our newest promotions, and really what are some of the other opportunities, some of those other conversations that you could be having with your customers. So things like how can you drive efficiencies within human resources? What are some of the opportunities around remote working? And really trying to look at which products of ours fit that gap and which solutions from our partners can best have that conversation. So please sign up if you aren't already. You'll see a load of toolkits, load of webinars, presentations, and so on. We'd love to have you join. We also have a platform called Imaging Rewards that's a little bit like an air miles scheme where you can log sales of products. We'll give you points for those products that you can then exchange for prizes. That's it from me. Thanks again, Steve, for a great webinar. I think we'll all agree. And we'll follow up with people in due course and appreciate you attending. So thanks again, Steve, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye all.